and welcome to this Monday's Mindset Monday, brought to you by Thought Provoking Change. Hey, this specific call is actually brought to you by The Unscripted Event, coming up in 2 short weeks away, May the 20th and 21st, here in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Get your tickets now. We are very limited on space. Go to www.theunscriptedevent.com. We are super excited to see you here. This morning, we have a very special guest with us that will be bringing us some incredible information on finding your identity and knowing who you are. This person is ultra special to me. I will never forget the first time that I really remember meeting him. We went to church together and he walked up to me and he looked at me and referred to me as superstar. That just sat with me. I'm like, interesting. And then it was the day before our wedding, or maybe it was even our wedding day. No, it was the day before our wedding. I'm driving through my neighborhood and I get stopped behind a truck of somebody that was a part of our wedding. Kate, what was he? A groomsman? Is that what they're called? A groomsman. And he was blocking the road. Well, little did I know that the man that referred to me as superstar also lived in the neighborhood that I lived in at the time. And I didn't really know him at that point. However, I knew we went to church together. So I said, hey, dude, I'm getting married tomorrow. Why don't you come to my wedding? And he and his wife came to our wedding. And here we are so many years later. I don't want to get myself in trouble. I think it's 3 years later. I love you, babe. Here we are. 4 years later. Thank you. 4 years later. And Ricardo is still super special in my life. In fact, here's another announcement for this group. The podcast will be launching soon, and Ricardo and I are co-hosting this thing together. So I asked him to come in, and periodically you'll hear me refer to him as Rick. But seeing as his name says Ricardo here on the screen, that's what we'll call him. But Ricardo is an amazing, amazing person, an amazing speaker, an amazing communicator. Ricardo, it's you, brother. Take it from here.
All right, John. I appreciate all of the kind words. I think you made some of it up, but we'll just pretend like it's all true. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much for that. But this morning, I know we don't have a whole lot of time. As you can see, I'm on the road right now. But Jonathan mentioned to me, he mentioned to me the idea of talking about identity this morning, and that's something that's been personal to me because most of my lifetime was spent living a counterfeit identity and living out an active identity crisis. And most people, unbeknownst to them, are in the same state, have gone through it, or all experiencing parts of it, symptoms of, identity crisis in their present life and don't know it because it's become normal to them. But you can get so used to dysfunction that dysfunction becomes normal, and the thing that's normal is dysfunctional to you. And that's a part of the identity crisis. You will absolutely live out what you believe to be true about yourself, even if it's not true. It just has to be true to you. So the things people say to you, the experiences that you have in your life, the things that you've seen, the things that you've done, whatever it is, those things can be contributing factors in your life, but we can sometimes allow contributing factors to fool us into believing they're actually determining factors, and they should not determine our life. For myself, that whole, that quote, I know a lot of you may have heard it before. Who was it that said it? I think it was C.H. Cooley, Charles Cooley, the looking glass self. That was actually how I lived most of my life. And I think the quote is, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. And that's a difficult way to live life, where you're subject to you around you find your identity where you don't have one of your own. And because that identity isn't anchored to something static, then you're actually trying to live out an identity that's actually a moving target. It's like being an actor or an actress in your own life. And you're living out a script that you had no contribution to. So you may not even have the ability, have the attributes that are needed to actually act out this role appropriately, but yet and still, that's how you live your life. You know, and it's like I said, it's all determined by what someone else says or what they see. If they see you well, you see yourself well. If they don't see you well, you don't see yourself well. And you get into this idea of pleasing people, or this attitude of having to please people. And if that's how you identify yourself, then that's what you're going to do your whole life. You're going to constantly need to please someone. And if they're not pleased, then you're not pleased with you. And that's a difficult way to live. And I lived my life in that way for a long time. And I know how hard it is to live life that way, where you're subject to someone else's thoughts. And you're the sum total of what everyone else sees in you, or everything that's happened to you. And that created a victim mindset for me, where I thought because things happened to me, that's who I was. It's like, okay, this has happened. So, you know, because this has happened, that means I can't do this because these things actually happen. And that's a false narrative, but I believed it so long that I began to believe that victim was who I was. So I lived out of that. So anytime there were things that were going on in my life that, things that I was doing where I may have failed that, or I may have quit rather than failing, I always gave myself the excuse, well, this happened, or well, that happened, or well, this thing went on, or well, this thing happened that I couldn't control. You know, these things that should be, once again, contributing factors, but I allowed them to become determining factors. And I want to go back to the whole victim mindset. It doesn't mean you wasn't victimized. I mean, there's been things with a lot of us. I'm sure there's people on this call right now that could talk about the things or the areas in their life where they've been victimized. It doesn't mean you haven't been victimized. It just means you don't live in the present active state of victimization. You know, where you're experiencing new pain over an old wound. You know, we don't actively go around picking off scabs when we're having a wound because the police is coming by. Sorry about that. We don't actively pick off scabs or undo sutures that the doctors have done. When they sew you up or you're healing, you don't pick that stuff off because you know it's a part of the healing process. It lets you know that healing is taking place. Now let me mute you just for a moment so it's not so loud. Too late. Too late. All right. But you don't do that in a natural sense. But we do that mentally and emotionally. We're constantly picking off scabs, constantly undoing sutures, you know, where there could be healing taking place. But we're so used to finding our identity in what happened to us that it's hard for us to escape that victim mindset. So in order to feel a sense of self, because sometimes the only thing that I gotta mute this time. I'm sorry, y'all. I apologize. Just a moment. And I still failed to do it. Lord have mercy. Okay. All right. I apologize. It's all this is going on, and I don't want everybody to be distracted by all the stuff that's happening. This whole thing of picking off scabs or undoing sutures is something we don't think about. We have better code or better security on our phones than we do on our minds. You know, we allow anything in, and we don't let as much out. Like we take a lot in, we don't let a lot out. So we hold on to a lot of things that's not meant for us to hold on to. Some things are meant to get through us and not get to us, and we ended up holding on to a lot of things that we're not meant to hold on to. And we end up carrying this victim mindset or this victim mentality that honestly is not the mentality that we're supposed to live our lives according to. Yes, it happened to us, but just because it happened to us doesn't mean it's true about us or it's the truth about us. And as I said earlier, just because it's true to you doesn't mean it's truth. and everything that's true is subject to truth, but truth is subject to nothing. It's not subjective. It's absolute. So this whole idea about I have my own truth, which this is what my identity is tied to, my truth or your truth or his truth. The only issue with that is nothing else, nothing is really alive. Everyone has their own truth. Then if nothing is really a lie, then my truth or my identity is not anchored to anything static. Once again, I'm living life with trying aiming at a moving target. Like my identity is a moving target. It's all the things that I'm doing right now. Like your identity is not what you do. Which is, I've been told that what you do is your identity. No, what you do is what you do. That's not your identity. You may find your identity sometimes in doing some of the things you do because there's an innate knowledge of ourselves that we honestly don't typically live out fully unless there's a relationship. I'm a believer, so I have a biblical worldview of things. I didn't live out my full identity, or I didn't know my full identity until I had a relationship with Christ. That's how I discovered who I was, because the things that I ran from were actually the things that I was supposed to be doing. I was trying to do things that I was told to do because I was told who I was. At birth, what happens? You're told by your mother and father your name. Then you're told by your mother and father how you're supposed to behave, what you're supposed to do, who you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to grow up to do, what college you're supposed to go to, what friends you're supposed to have, who you're supposed to marry. All these things you're told about who you are. So from birth on up, your identity is based on what someone else is saying, what someone else tells you. Now, does that mean some of those things aren't true? Some of those things can be true about you because your parents, there are certain things that are passed on biologically that you have a predisposition to. But each of us are individuals, and individuals, we all have our individual things, our individual giftings, our individual talents, our individual things that make us who we are. There are certain things that I have that my parents don't have. There's certain things they have that I don't have. So all these things can be contributing, but they shouldn't be the things that you determine your life off of. This is what leads us to a place where we try to find our identity in things that, like alcohol, drugs, even education. You can get 5,000 degrees because it makes you feel better about yourself because you don't necessarily know yourself and you don't necessarily feel good about yourself. Like guys, working out all the time. Not that working out is a bad thing, but you work out because you want to look a certain way because you don't feel a certain way. I want to look good, but I don't necessarily feel good. I want to drive this nice car because it makes me look a certain way to people, but I don't necessarily believe that that's who I really am. So I need an image. I need something, some construct to show people, because when I go home, I'm actually sad and depressed. I actually don't feel like the thing that I present to people because I really don't know who I am. I'm doing everything I was told I was supposed to do. I'm doing the things that people have instructed me to do. I'm doing those things that I feel based on what I've been taught that I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be a doctor, but I feel like I should be a lawyer. I'm supposed to be an engineer, but I feel like my gifting or what I really love to do is to help people. Well, if I help people in this sense, in this way that I feel like I've been called to, I may not make the money that I was told that I'm supposed to make, because I'm supposed to have this and that and that and that in life. And so you end up doing things or living out things or trying to do things or pursuing things that honestly aren't authentic to you. And I'm saying all this because these are things that I myself have done. And I guarantee I'm not the only one that has done things or lived out things or pursued things that honestly wasn't something you really felt deep inside, was something that you really wanted to do, but you did it because the people around you said that's what you should do. Or everyone in your family was an educator, so you became an educator. These things that happen within family groups, or people are ostracized when they don't do this, so you feel like you have to. This is what leads people into this identity crisis. Not having something static to anchor yourself to or anchor your identity to. And I go back to my faith. As a believer, I know that being created by God means that the only one who truly can define me is God.
It's like me trying to tell someone who is a home builder and I write books for a living. I'm going to tell the person that actually builds homes, who knows the ins and outs of home building, I, Ricardo, a book writer, I'm going to tell you how to do that and how things are supposed to be built, how things are supposed to look, what building code is. I'm going to tell you, the person who does that for a living. That's what you did. You built that. You know the ins and outs of it. You know that where the support beams are. You know all the ins and outs of this construction. But I'm going to tell you how that thing is supposed to work, or how, or what the best way to build this particular building, or how to set it up, or whatever it is, what the foundation is supposed to be made out of. That's what we do sometimes. God created us, but we ourselves self-identify, we self-diagnose, we tell ourselves this is what we're supposed to do. When there's a problem, we troubleshoot to the manual we would in our book, like we would in our car. We will consult the manual, or we'll go to a professional that knows how to diagnose or how to troubleshoot. But we spend a lot of time ourselves not going to the creator so that he can tell us how this thing is supposed to function. Because just because I can do something doesn't mean I should do something. Just because I can use a spoon as a fork, in some ways I can make it work. It may be difficult, don't mean I should. So just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do that thing. What was I created to do? Because none of us would think that throwing up a bunch of rubber in the air, throwing metal in the air, throwing oil in the air, and all those things randomly, throw them in the air, and they'll come down with all this intention and land and become a BMW. All these random things. We throw them in the air and they land, and somehow all this randomness creates all this intentionality. So there's an intent for how these things were drawn together. There's an intent for how we were stitched and knitted and drawn together. So just because I can go out and do this doesn't mean that's what I was created to do. So anytime you're operating or doing something outside of the created intent, you end up living a life that's counterfeit and inauthentic. And what that does, that creates a tension between who you are and who you should be. There's a rending of the garment, so to speak. This is what I feel innately. This is what I'm doing right now. And there's a massive tension between the two. And that space in between what you're doing and who you should be, or what you should be doing, that space is where addictions come from. Because addictions fill the gap between who I think I am and who I actually am. Because there's this idea of there being more, but you don't know what the more is. So you feel it. You spend your life trying to find out what that more is, and you fill it with all types of things to find your identity or find a sense of self, something that makes sense to you. So you end up getting caught up in all these things, these cycles. You get to doing all these things, trying to feel some sense of self, you have this deficient mentality, and you don't know it's a deficient mentality. That's why you have this desire for more. I want more. I need more. I need more. I need more. Well, more is never enough. Why is more never enough? Because more isn't the issue. It isn't more. It's what you're putting in that place. It's what you're filling that gap with, that void with. Money will never do it. That's why there's people that have been highly successful. We know of a few that have done so publicly, that were multimillionaires. And I'm not talking about the ones that had mental issues, because in some way we all can have, issues mentally when we allow ourselves to get stuck in these toxic mind states. But I'm talking about people who have been highly successful. Everyone looks at them and say, hey man, they're doing so well. And then they kill themselves and no one knows why. No one knows why. Like, what happened? They had all this money. They had 2 or 3 islands. They owned 10, 15 cars, 2 jets. They had all these things, but still it wasn't enough. So obviously it wasn't the things that they acquired that made them feel whole. Obviously it wasn't the money that gave them the satisfaction of the joy that they were seeking. There was something else. There was something more that they needed outside of what they themselves could grab hold to, or they themselves had access to. And so that's where my relationship with God came into play. I had to get something that I didn't have access to myself. Now, that doesn't mean everyone has to believe the same thing. That doesn't mean everyone has to be a believer or a Christian. Well, let me tell you something. Everyone on this call was created. You didn't just randomly, things didn't just randomly come together to create the people that are on this call. And so because there wasn't a randomness in your creation, there's not a randomness in how your life should be. You know, there's absolutely an identity or a path that each of us were created to walk out, or a way that we were created to live. And once again, I'll say, it doesn't mean that you can't do something else. It just means you're more fulfilled in the areas that you were equipped for, you were called to, and the things that God has actually ordained for you in your life for you to do. Don't know what that is for each of you, but I didn't like talking in front of people. I had absolute stage fright. But you know what I enjoy now? I love talking in front of people. Not because I have a lot to say, it's just because I love people. I used to tell people I hated people. That was a lie. It's just I felt so bad about myself. I didn't want to be in front of people because they might see what I felt about me or what I saw in myself. So I told myself I didn't like people. You know, I avoided public gatherings, meetings, and all these things. I avoided that like the plague. I told myself I didn't enjoy speaking, not just talking with people, but speaking in front of large groups of people. Because once again, I didn't like people. Well, the very thing that I was gifted for is the very thing that I didn't like, but I didn't know it, because the things that I was told growing up was opposite of what I'm doing now. But, you know, I was told that, you know, you should just keep your head down and live your life. You know, well, you can't do this and that because, you know, that happened to you. So, you know, there's no point in trying to do that. People like you, they do that. They don't get those opportunities. John, I don't know what time it is. I'm sorry.
Hey, you're doing
I have
great.
not looked at the time.
You're doing great. We are not far from out of time, so we wanted to, as always, give everybody an opportunity to throw this back and forth so we can learn more. Thank you so much, Ricardo. That was amazing. You're incredible. So, in a nutshell, live with authenticity.
No, I was gonna say.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what it boils down to. But I was gonna say, I try to condense some of the that I had on my heart to say. But trying to condense something like that in such a small space, a small block of time, isn't the easiest thing to do. But I hope it wasn't disjointed. The things that I tried to say,
no,
because there's a lot packaged in that conversation.
Absolutely, there was a whole lot packaged, and he will be sharing with us more about identity this Wednesday evening. So we look forward to everybody joining us Wednesday night so that he can really unpack this a little bit more. We have a couple minutes. Who wants to go first? Again, like you said, live who you are. Live who you're called to be. And some of us know our calling, some of us don't so much. I'm sorry, who was talking?
I can't raise my hand because I'm driving
Susan.
and I can't see the button. Can you hear me?
It's all good. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say that good things come in small packages, and this information was awesome, and I'm going to have to listen to it again to digest it.
And that's one of the beauties of everything being recorded, so that you can go back if you're not able to be with us, or if you need to listen to it again and again. That's great. So Susan, we'll look forward to seeing you Wednesday night, where again, Ricardo will unpack this a little bit more. He and I have been spending a lot of time together recently, and he was telling me he speaks at a men's group for his church, and he was telling me about identity. And I went to him and I said, you know what, would you be willing to talk to us about identity? Because so many people are not really aware of who they are. And just like he said, you can have all the fun, all the toys, all the trinkets, but not know who you are. And you can have all the trinkets and all the toys and know who you are. But the important thing here, as us building as a community, us building as a group, us building as what I call a family, it's about who are you? What are you here to do? I love how he said, he used the example educator. You know, everybody in your family is an educator. Oh, Kate's head popped up. I saw that. Everybody in your family is an educator, so you become an educator, but that's not for you. So find out what is for you. Ken, I see your Bart Simpson hand is up. I love the yellow hands.
It's fun. Yeah, the best explanation of identity I think that I've heard is it's like a thermostat on your life, where whatever results you're after, you will achieve to whatever your identity is. So if you're at like 70 degrees of health, income, whatever it is, and you start heating up your life, your identity is going to kick in and bring you back down to that 70-degree level. Likewise, if you start dropping below that, the heater's going to kick on and you're going to get back to work and get focused. And that's the way I've thought about identity for a long time. Doesn't really help in figuring out what your identity is, but it helps you to realize where you are and the results that you've been getting.
That's a very valid point. Now, let me ask you on the example that you just used, and I'm sure you were probably just picking out a number, and 70 was the first thing that came to your head. Say that you're operating at a 70 on whatever that scale is. Let's just call it 100. You're operating at a 70. Are you able to change it and operate at an 80 or a 90? Or, in your opinion, are you just stuck at a 70 and that's it for you?
No. You can change your identity. You can only change your identity. No, I take that back. I used to think you can only change it up, but I've seen people change it down, unfortunately. But yeah, you can change that identity. It takes, first you have to realize where you're at. Obviously, you got to figure out where you are at if you want to move forward.
Right.
Because if you think you're at 70, but you're really idling at 60, then you're not going to go in the right direction. But it's definitely possible to change it through. Best way I found to change it is through commitments, and even if they're small commitments to yourself, saying, I'm going to get up and shave every day. And then once you start doing that, you start building that self-confidence within yourself. And that's the best way to change an identity that I found.
Yeah, no doubt. I heard Jeff Hoffman speak recently, and he's the guy that started, what was it, Dean? It was Priceline, right? Yeah. He was talking about how he bought a Ferrari, and we all know they make a lot of noise. That's the point of, well, a point of them, not the point. And he hit a certain speed, and I don't recall what it is. Maybe you remember, Dean. You can interject if you do. It was like 130 miles an hour or something in the 130 to 140 range. Something. I mean, it was a little bit, just a hair above the speed limit, but that's besides the point. It's not illegal if you don't get caught. So, no, disclaimer, that's a joke. In that space, the 130 to 140, the car would go silent. It would sound like a Tesla. So we always thought something was wrong with it. He took it in, and they said, no, that's when everything is running in harmony, and the car goes silent for that period. It's much like identity. It's just finding your identity and knowing exactly where that lies, and things will go in harmony. That's not to say there won't be challenges, because there will. But your life is in harmony when you are living the life of what you're supposed to be doing, who you are, and following the path that God has laid out for you. Because here's the thing, whether you're a believer or you are not a believer, God destined you for something here. Yes, it is to be with him. There's no doubt about that. Yet, your life was created to serve out a full purpose. We look forward to seeing you guys Wednesday evening at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for more discussion on finding your identity. And remember, this call was brought to you by The Unscripted Event. Coming up in 2 short weeks, we see people flexing because they're going to be here May the 20th and the 21st in the Atlanta, Georgia area. We're looking forward to seeing everybody. first off Wednesday evening, and then make sure that you make it to the unscripted event as well. It will be life-changing, and lots of changes are coming. Everybody be blessed. See you Wednesday.